I think I'm running out of room. How could something so poisonous look like such a tasty beverage, like a grape drink? Oh! Hi, thanks for stopping by again. Well, while I got you here, let's talk about this. On last week's episode, we were filming the PSP home console and how to build one in an ongoing build series. Part 3, to be specific, was revolved around the PS2 controller and making a controller out of this. Feel free to check it out. Anyway, this week's episode comes as a question from one of the viewers, and it's regarding Flux. How to use it and why it's so important, and what is the purpose of it. So anyway, let me head over to this week's letter in a audio format, and we'll go on from there. Thanks very much for stopping by, and enjoy episode 5, At Home Do-It-Yourself Modifications. Thanks guys.
Hey Jared, Bill from STC Pod here. I've been loving your recent retro game mod videos, but one thing has always been a mystery to me. You've mentioned Flux as being part of your kit, but the only Flux I know about goes into a time-traveling DeLorean. So I guess my question to you is, what the Flux is Flux?
Right, so I've set you up a few examples here, Bill, and for the viewers watching, of the most common things you'll probably find as far as Flux and such goes. Now, joining the odd wire and things like that is fine, right? Without Flux, you may get away with it. But when you come to electronics in specifics, video games, consumer goods, things like that, you want a reliable join every time, and there'll be multiple of them, so you don't want to create a failure point. This is where Flux is really important, right? Specifically for having consistent resistance, low impedance across your joins, making them last. The list just goes on. It's just beneficial in every way, right? Now, anyway, so this is your rosin your rosin solder, and probably the most common one you'll find, derived from tree sap originally. There are new types. This one here can require a cleaning agent to get rid of it, usually alcohol based or something like that, solvent based. It works in conjunction with a solder that doesn't have the Flux inbuilt into it. Now this is where I'm getting to my next point. Resin core Flux. You can actually buy solder with it all inbuilt, and the heat activates the resin as the solder melts. It all does it for you, right? But for real precision jobs, you can't go past this sort of stuff, right? Okay, so anyway, now I've explained what they are, let's get into how they work and what they do as you use them. We're going to perform resoldering this microchip in place. One's going to be with Flux and one's going to be without Flux. I'm going to show you the difference and what happens. Right, thanks guys, let's carry on. So what we have here is 60% tin, 40% lead, right? To create an alloy, which is known as this solder, 60-40 solder. Which brings me to this point here. The melting point of tin is 620 degrees Fahrenheit, and the melting point of lead is 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, if we combine the two into an alloy, we get an interesting thing happen. The actual melting point of it becomes lower, and we end up with a solderable range here and here. 376 Fahrenheit or 191 C for a 60-40. Which is really cool because these are workable temperatures. So anyway, let's get into how the process works, and this will then explain why Flux is so important. Right, so you can see a through-hole resistor here. Now, the pooling solder and stuff's all done really well here, right? And you have your plane here on the board, which is made of copper, right? And obviously this joins to it. Like so. See how it splits across the different pads here? And that provides a good quality, solid mechanical joint. Now to achieve that, how it's done, I'll draw this for you. Here is one of our legs of our resistor here, going down through the PCB on a cross-sectional view, like that. Now to have that good electronic join, well, to be stable, you're going to need something that's going to last against vibration, mechanical movement, stresses, all sorts of things like that. It's where a good quality solder joint is a safe and reliable connection. So you would heat the alloy up till it's in its melting point and melt it over to this, therefore fusing this, the copper pad and your unit all in situ. But therein lies another problem. What you get from here is oxidization, specifically when heating up the thing, or the surface, sorry, you get O2 molecules form. Now, to get rid of that, that's where this bad boy comes in. Let's get over to that bit now. Right, so at any point after you reach 191 degrees C, or the equivalent in Fahrenheit, you get what's known as wetting. Now wetting can only take place when these two copper surfaces and the solder actually bond to create a new type of alloy and a strong joint. But what happens is if you have dirt or grime or oxidization formed from a long time exposure to air before being soldered to, for instance, and during the heating process, you'll get the oxidization I was talking about earlier, and you end up with a dull, bad looking joint, and I'll show you why that looks like that. This is where flux comes into place. Flux is like a mild sort of acid, and it actually cleans the surface of what you're soldering to, right? It also prevents oxidization happening at the time of soldering as well, if done properly, and removes oxidization from the surface you're going to solder to. Anyway, so let's get into doing some soldering, and I'll show you how that all happens and what a good one looks like and a bad one looks like, and where flux comes in to making this all happen. Alright, cool as. So I have an audio visual connector here, and I am trying to solder to it. Now, got quite a dirty tip on this. Yeah, we're a dirty tip. And I'm trying to solder to it, right? Now see, you notice none of anything sticking to this. It's all staying on the iron. There's no wetting action taking place there, right? So, let's clean the iron. This time let's apply some flux and see what happens. Right, so now I have the flux applied. Let's see what happens when we heat it up now. The smoke you see come off is the flux activating, and good wetting action has taken place. See that? It's nice and shiny, and the solder is now encased in a small film of resin around the outside of it to prevent further oxidization. Also, there's good penetration between here and there. And you see how easy that's stuck to it? That's the power of flux. Now, let's bond two surfaces together. One's really easy. Let's try with two. So now our surface is heated onto. If we were going to join a wire to it again, you would actually reapply your flux, because the moment you produce heat into that system again, you can actually reintroduce oxidization to the joint. So what you would do is have your pre-tinned wire, and it's now fluxed on this side. You would get the thing, heat the two surfaces together evenly, and hold there as still as you can. The problem with 60/40 is it has a big plastic range. Now the plastic range is when the solder is neither liquid or a solid, right? It's kind of that in-between phase, and that's when it's at its weakest. And if you move it as it's setting, you'll get cracks and things form. Now, this one's okay, but what happens if we move it a lot and don't set it properly in the cooling process? Well, I'll show you what happens right now. So now I'll come out of the center of this AV thing with a non-tinned wire, and I'll show you how a bad one looks. So you heat this, get this all liquid again. See how they're non-tinned and there's no flux? It just doesn't really want to stick to it. If we move it back and forward when it's trying to set, notice how this one's really kind of dull, but you look at this one, super shiny the whole way around, and a dull one here. That's classed as an unacceptable join. Now this has actually introduced oxidization on the outside, as you can see, and it's weak. It's not the worst case I've ever seen of it, but it still wouldn't really be considered a good join. Whereas this one is plenty of flux around it, nice and shiny, and a good wetting action has taken place. This one has not. Now, one reason you want this, right, is, well, take for instance this Nintendo game, made in 1985. All these soldered connections are still really good, and they haven't oxidized and they've lasted the test of time. Now the problem being was if these had oxidization on them at the time of manufacture, given these things are now 30 plus years old, you would be seeing a lot of oxidization and component failure and things like that starting to happen. So this is what the importance of flux is, right? Like I was saying to you before. So anyway, let's get on to going through and doing a ribbon on this side with flux, and then a ribbon without. You'll be able to see the difference, what they look like. Alright, so I've fluxed this row here. Now you've got your no clean flux pen, which is what I'm using for this. Same diff as this other stuff, but really handy for tight pinch stuff rather than getting in the pot. Right, so anyway, let's hook in and solder this. Now we've got the iron turned up to 210 degrees C, which is perfect for 6040, and we have which is about 410, 450 Fahrenheit, right, something around that range. Right, so we just get our little iron now. It should just apply super easy, a bit of heat, and boom, 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 straight on like that, just like that. Literally just flows on so nice and easy with this resin, right? Problem is, if you don't have the resin, you may run into a few problems, whereas trying to get the the flux, trying to get the heat into it to get the solder to stick. Clean join, bad connection. And I mean, when you're dealing with, say, this many pins, you just don't want to be fault finding this sort of stuff. So this is where reliability comes in key. And if this was in a hospital environment, aerospace, anything like that, this is where it's super crucial, right? And you just can't have that risk anymore. But I mean, machines do it all now for these little things, but back in the day people used to do it. Anyway, so that's all good. Let's head over to this other side now and we'll use no flux and I'll compare the difference for you. So let's hook in. I'm already having a lot of trouble. See? Just doesn't want to take, you see? Not very well either. See, it's just balling up because of heat. It's not really passing through properly. It will go, but it's not going to give you a good job. And the oxidization would have formed already as well. So I mean, it all still works, but it's a fairly dull colour in comparison to the one on the back, which is gleaming, and the solder quality is crap. So anyway, I'll solder gun all these off with this bad boy and get those back started, and we'll clean them all out with Flux. And anyway, we'll put this back together and test it out and see how it all works. So now that all went really well and I've put it all back together, a few things you should note when you're going to do these yourself, if you're going to get into the tighter, harder soldering jobs. Correct temperature for your particular solder type on your iron. They're all different. Plastic range is different on your soldering types, so just make sure you know that. There's an enteric type, which is like has basically no plastic range. The reason for that is for particular applications where you won't be able to hold the wire still. That is so it has an instant set, but it's fairly specific mixture and quite expensive. So anyway, let's plug this in, give it a go. Hope you found this all helpful, and let's see if it all works now. Alright, let's put him in. Nice. Well, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed and you found that helpful, Bill. Oh. CC Unite. Talk later.
Hey everyone, Bill here from STC Podcast. Do you have a crazy retro game modification in mind that you'd like to try, but are too scared? Send your idea in an email to Jared at retrorevolutionsdesigns@gmail.com. If he chooses your concept, he'll show you how to do it right here at the Retro Revolutions YouTube channel, and even send you back the completed modification. Good deal. Great channel, Retro Revolutions.